October 1887. The Colorado mountains had already begun preparing for winter. Golden aspens covered the hillsides like rivers of sunlight frozen upon the earth. Cold morning air drifted through endless pine forests, carrying the scent of cedar, damp stone, and distant wood smoke. Steam locomotives had become the lifeline of the American West. Every week, thousands of passengers traveled across mountains, valleys, and rivers that only a generation earlier had seemed impossible to cross. To most people, the railroad represented progress. To William, it represented certainty. William was 32 years old. He worked as a railway inspector for the Western Mountain Railway Company. His job was wonderfully ordinary. He examined tracks, measured bridges, inspected tunnels, verified station reports, compared official maps with what actually existed along the railway. He trusted numbers more than rumors, measurements more than stories. If a bridge appeared on a map, it existed. If a station was listed in the railway register, trains stopped there. If something could not be documented, William assumed it simply was not true. His fellow inspectors often joked that William believed rulers and clocks more than people. He usually smiled and agreed. After all, steel rails never exaggerated. On the evening of October 18th, William sat alone inside the Denver Railway office finishing another stack of inspection reports. Outside, rain tapped gently against the tall windows. The station bustled with travelers beginning long journeys westward. Conductors called departures, porters loaded trunks onto waiting baggage cars. Steam drifted lazily beneath the great iron roof. Everything followed its familiar rhythm. Then, someone knocked upon William's office door. "Come in." The door opened slowly. An elderly station clerk stepped inside carrying a thick leather folder. His name was Harold Benton. He had worked for the railway longer than anyone else in the building, nearly 40 years. Harold rarely smiled, not because he wasn't friendly, he simply preferred quiet. Tonight, however, something about him seemed unusually uncertain. "I have something that belongs to your department." William accepted the folder. "No inspection number?" Harold shook his head. "No reference code either." William frowned. "That's unusual." "It is." He opened the folder. Inside rested 6 handwritten statements. Each had been signed by passengers traveling aboard the Frontier Express only 3 nights earlier. William began reading. Statement 1. The train stopped shortly after midnight at a place called Blackridge Station. My wife and I left the train for nearly an hour. We purchased fresh bread from a nearby bakery and drank coffee inside a small hotel before returning to our carriage. William turned the page. Statement 2. There was a white church overlooking the station. I clearly remember hearing its bell ring 7 times while we waited to depart. William continued reading. Every account described nearly identical details. The same station, the same hotel, the same church, the same peaceful little town. Yet, something immediately caught his attention. None of the passengers described the town as strange. No one mentioned ghosts, no mysterious lights, no impossible events. Instead, they remembered warm meals, friendly conversations, comfortable beds, simple kindness. The sort of ordinary experiences no one would bother inventing. William closed the folder. "Where is Blackridge Station?" Harold remained silent. William reached toward the enormous railway map hanging beside his desk. He traced the Frontier Express route carefully through the mountains. Denver, Silver Junction, Pine Creek, Eagle Pass, Redstone. Nothing. There was no Blackridge station, not even an abandoned siding. He checked another map, then another. Still nothing. Has the station been renamed? Harold quietly answered. There has never been a station by that name. William looked up. Then why were these reports filed? Because the passengers insisted. Perhaps they confused another town. We considered that. They all described the exact same location. William frowned. How many passengers? Harold hesitated. 47. William slowly lowered the papers. 47 people reported stopping at a station that doesn't exist? Yes. And every statement matches? Almost word for word. Silence settled over the office. Outside, another westbound train released a long, lonely whistle into the cool autumn evening. For the first time in his career, a map, a photograph, and 47 witnesses all disagreed with reality. And somewhere, beyond the Colorado mountains, a train was preparing to depart once again, toward a station that officially did not exist. The following morning, William requested every inspection report connected to that section of railway. Only one file arrived. Inspection number 47, completed exactly 9 years earlier. The report consisted of only 2 pages. The first page contained routine measurements, track condition, bridge stability, rail alignment, perfectly ordinary. The second page was blank, except for one sentence written across the center in dark ink. If the train stops here after midnight, remain aboard until sunrise. William read the sentence 3 times. There was no signature, no official seal, no explanation. Simply the warning. By afternoon, curiosity completely replaced skepticism. William carried the mysterious folder to the office of Railway Superintendent Thomas Avery. The superintendent was a practical man in his 60s. He had spent nearly his entire life building railroads across the American frontier. William placed every document upon the desk. I believe these deserve investigation. The superintendent quietly examined each page. He seemed remarkably unsurprised. Finally, he sighed. I wondered when this would return. William looked confused. You've seen this before? 3 times. 3? Once in 1878, again in 1881, and now. William stared. Why hasn't anyone investigated? They did. What happened? The superintendent walked toward the office window overlooking the station platforms. The inspectors returned. William waited. And? They submitted perfectly ordinary reports. No station, no town, no explanation. They claimed the passengers had simply imagined everything. William frowned. Did you believe them? The old superintendent remained silent for a very long time. Then he quietly reached into a locked drawer. From inside, he removed a small black and white photograph. He handed it to William. The photograph showed a simple railway platform beneath a wooden station sign. Several passengers stood beside a waiting steam locomotive. Behind them, a neat little town rested peacefully beneath the mountains. Children smiled toward the camera. Smoke drifted from cottage chimneys. A white church overlooked the square. The station sign clearly read, Blackridge. William studied every detail. It looks authentic. It is. When was it taken? The superintendent answered softly. That's the problem. He pointed toward the back of the photograph. William turned it over. Written in careful handwriting were 7 unsettling words. Location unknown. Station not found the next morning. William slowly looked back at the photograph. Outside, another westbound train released a long, lonely whistle into the cool autumn evening. For the first time in his career, a map, a photograph, and 47 witnesses all disagreed with reality. And somewhere, beyond the Colorado mountains, a train was preparing to depart once again, toward a station that officially did not exist. The following morning arrived beneath a sky of pale gray clouds. A cold autumn wind swept across the Denver rail yard, carrying the familiar scent of coal smoke, machine oil, and damp timber. Hundreds of workers moved through the station as they always had. Conductors checked passenger lists. Porters loaded trunks. Engineers polished brass fittings on waiting locomotives. To everyone else, it was another ordinary day. To William Carter, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The photograph of Blackridge Station rested inside his leather satchel. He had studied it nearly 20 times since leaving Superintendent Avery's office. Each time, he noticed another small detail. A flower box beneath one station window. A wooden bench beside the platform. Children standing near a bakery. Even a station clock. The hands pointed to 11:47 p.m. William frowned. Why would someone choose that exact moment for a photograph? Nighttime railway photography was almost impossible in 1887, yet the image was remarkably clear. Almost too clear. By 8 o'clock that morning, William was sitting inside the railway archives. The archives occupied the basement of the Denver headquarters. Stone walls surrounded rows upon rows of wooden shelves filled with journals, engineering drawings, payroll records, and construction reports dating back almost 30 years. Dust floated peacefully through thin beams of morning sunlight. An elderly archivist named Eleanor Briggs greeted him with a warm smile. "You've come looking for old ghosts." William smiled politely. "I don't believe in ghosts." She laughed softly. "No, you believe in paperwork." "I do. Sometimes paperwork keeps stranger secrets." William appreciated her sense of humor. "I need every record mentioning Blackridge." Eleanor's smile faded ever so slightly. Without asking another question, she disappeared between the towering shelves. Several minutes later, she returned carrying only one small wooden box. "That's all there is." William looked surprised. "Only this?" Everything else disappeared years ago. Disappeared? No one knows why. He picked up the brass luggage tag. Stamped into the metal were the words, Blackridge Grand Hotel. The number beneath read, Room 12. The tag showed years of careful use. Its edges had been polished smooth by countless hands. This was no decorative souvenir. Someone had actually used it. He turned it over. Carved on the back were tiny initials, E.H. Finally, he opened the notebook. The first page belonged to another railway inspector. His name was written neatly at the top. Edmund Harper. Date, October 21st, 1878. William settled comfortably into his chair. The handwriting was careful, methodical, very similar to his own. Assigned to investigate reports concerning Blackridge. I expect to settle the matter within 2 days. William smiled slightly. Exactly the sort of confidence he himself might have written. He continued reading. The station appears on several internal railway schedules, but on no government survey maps. No construction permits exist. No tax records. No postal registration. No census information. Yet employees speak of the town as though it has always existed. William paused. Employees, not passengers. Railway employees. That changed everything. The next several pages described interviews with engineers, conductors, and station masters. One conductor claimed he had stopped there 6 different times. Another insisted the bakery sold the finest cinnamon bread west of Denver. A fireman remembered borrowing a shovel from the station caretaker during heavy snowfall. Each story sounded perfectly ordinary. Each person spoke with complete confidence. None believed Blackridge to be mysterious. To them, it was simply another stop along the railway. William looked thoughtfully toward Eleanor. Did Inspector Harper ever submit his final report? The elderly archivist slowly shook her head. No. He disappeared? No. He came back. William relaxed slightly. Then where's the report? She answered quietly. He said there was nothing to report. William frowned. But this notebook was never included. William returned to the journal. The entries slowly became stranger. Not frightening, simply confusing. Passengers appear unusually rested after leaving Blackridge. Children speak fondly of the town. Several refuse to believe it cannot be found. Station clock remains fixed at 11:47 p.m. Nobody comments upon this. William stopped reading. Fixed. He remembered the photograph. The clock had shown exactly the same time. Another page. Hotel owner insists breakfast is served only after sunrise. Curiously, no one has ever eaten breakfast there. William blinked. That makes no sense. The train departed before sunrise, so no passenger ever remained long enough to eat. Still, why serve breakfast at all? The final written page contained only a conversation. I asked the station master why no morning trains arrived. He smiled kindly. Then he answered, because morning has not reached us yet. No further explanation followed. The remaining pages were blank. William carefully closed the notebook. He suddenly noticed something tucked inside the back cover. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map. Unlike official railway maps, this one showed only a single location: Blackridge, the station, the hotel, the church, a schoolhouse, a bakery, several homes, a river, an old water tower. Everything had been drawn with remarkable care. At the very bottom, Harper had written one sentence: "If I fail to return before dawn." William's pulse quickened. He unfolded the lower corner. The sentence continued: "Tell my wife I finally found the town." Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Just those words. That evening, William visited Superintendent Avery once again. He placed Harper's notebook upon the desk. The old superintendent quietly examined the map. "I've never seen this." It was hidden inside the journal. The old superintendent remained silent. Finally, he spoke. "You still wish to investigate?" "I do." "You understand every inspector before you abandoned the case." William nodded. "They abandoned it because they couldn't explain it. And you believe you can explain it." William looked toward the office window where the setting sun painted the rail yard in warm shades of gold. "No. I believe I can observe it." The superintendent smiled faintly. A better answer. He opened a locked cabinet and removed the railway pass stamped with the company's highest authority. "You'll travel aboard the Frontier Express. Tomorrow night." "As an inspector?" "No. As an ordinary passenger." William looked puzzled. "Why?" "Because whatever Blackridge may be, it never seems to welcome investigators." The following afternoon, William packed lightly. One leather journal, a fountain pen, a pocket watch, the mysterious photograph, Harper's notebook, a folding map, a compass, and one small lantern. Nothing more. He believed unnecessary luggage distracted careful observation. Before leaving home, he wrote a brief note and placed it upon his writing desk. traveling west for routine inspection. Expected return within 1 week. He hesitated, then added one final sentence. If I discover anything unusual, I'll write everything down. Night settled over Denver. Steam drifted lazily beneath the station roof. Passengers boarded the westbound Frontier Express. One by one. Families embraced. Conductors called final departures. The locomotive released a deep, echoing whistle that rolled across the city like distant thunder. William climbed aboard. He found his seat beside the window. As the train slowly pulled away from the platform, he unfolded Harper's map one final time. There, near the edge of the paper, he noticed something he had somehow overlooked before. A tiny arrow pointed toward the station. Beside it, written so lightly it was almost invisible, were 6 quiet words. Do not trust the morning whistle. William stared at the message. Outside, the lights of Denver slowly disappeared into the darkness. Ahead lay miles of silent track winding through the Colorado mountains. And somewhere, beyond those distant forests, if the stories were true, a train would soon stop at a town that no map had ever been willing to remember. The Frontier Express climbed steadily into the Colorado mountains. Its great steam engine breathed rhythmically into the cool autumn night. Clouds of white steam drifted across the moonlit valleys before disappearing among endless forests of pine and aspen. Inside the passenger cars, everything felt peaceful. The warm glow of oil lamps reflected softly against polished walnut walls. The gentle rocking of the train lulled many travelers toward sleep. Some quietly read newspapers. Others whispered to family members before settling beneath wool blankets. William Carter remained awake. His leather journal rested upon his lap. Every 20 minutes he recorded the train's progress. 9:15 p.m. Passed Pine Creek. 9:52 p.m. Crossed North Fork Bridge. 10:28 p.m. Light snowfall beginning. Everything matched the official timetable perfectly, exactly as expected, exactly as it should. Across the aisle sat an elderly gentleman wearing a dark brown overcoat. He had been reading a thick history book since leaving Denver. Occasionally, he glanced toward William with quiet curiosity. Finally, he smiled. "You look like a man working instead of traveling." William returned the smile. "Perhaps a little of both." The gentleman closed his book. "My name is Benjamin Foster." William Carter. "Business?" "Railway inspection." Benjamin chuckled softly. "So you're one of the people making certain we arrive safely." "I try." The old man nodded toward William's notebook. "You've been writing since we left." "A habit. A good one. My wife always said memories deserve paper." William appreciated the remark. "So do I." As the conversation continued, William learned that Benjamin was traveling west to visit his daughter in California. It would be the longest journey he had ever taken. "I've always loved trains," Benjamin admitted. "They allow a man to watch the country change 1 mile at a time." William looked out the window. Moonlight painted silver across the distant mountains. "It is beautiful." Benjamin smiled. "And patient." A young mother seated several rows ahead quietly sang a lullaby to her sleeping son. Near the rear of the carriage, 2 businessmen played a slow game of cards beneath a lantern. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. William found that strangely comforting. If Blackridge truly existed, surely someone aboard this train would mention it. Yet no one did. By 11:10 p.m., the train entered a narrow mountain pass. Towering cliffs rose on either side of the tracks. The moon disappeared behind drifting clouds. Only the locomotive's bright headlamp pierced the darkness ahead. William checked his pocket watch. 37 minutes remained until the mysterious arrival time listed in Harper's notebook. 11:47 p.m. The station clock in the photograph. The railway schedule. Everything pointed toward that exact minute. At 11:25 p.m., the conductor entered the carriage. He walked calmly down the aisle, checking tickets with practiced efficiency. When he reached William, he paused politely. "Good evening, sir." William handed over his ticket. The conductor examined it carefully, then returned it with a smile. "Enjoy your journey." William hesitated briefly. "May I ask a question?" "Certainly." "Will we be making any additional stops tonight?" The conductor thought for only a moment. "No." William frowned. "None at all?" "Not until Redstone." According to the official timetable, that answer was correct. William thanked him, yet somehow the reply unsettled him even more. At 11:33 p.m., something changed. The train slowed. Only slightly. William noticed immediately. The wheels no longer sang across the rails with their usual steady rhythm. Instead, the locomotive seemed to glide more gently. Benjamin Foster looked up from his book. "We're slowing." "So we are." Neither man spoke again. Outside, the mountains had vanished. The windows revealed only thick white mist. Not fog drifting across the tracks, mist surrounding the train itself. It seemed almost illuminous beneath the moonlight. William had traveled these mountains dozens of times. He had never seen weather behave quite like this. 11:39 p.m. The engine whistle sounded once. Long, low, almost melancholy. Several sleeping passengers stirred. The young mother gently rocked her child without waking him. William looked toward the front of the carriage. The headlamp illuminated nothing except endless white mist. No cliffs, no trees, no stars. It was as if the entire train floated through a quiet cloud. Benjamin suddenly spoke. "Listen." William listened carefully. At first, he heard only the steady rhythm of the wheels. Then, very faintly, another sound. A church bell. One slow chime. Then another. William counted silently. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The sound drifted gently through the mist before fading into complete silence. Exactly 7 times, just as every passenger's statement had described. Benjamin smiled pleasantly. "There must be a town nearby." William looked toward him. "You've traveled this route before?" "Never." "Then how do you know?" The old man shrugged. "It feels welcoming." 11:45 p.m. The train slowed even further. Steam drifted lazily past the windows. Some passengers now stood, stretching their legs. A little girl pressed her face against the glass. "I see lights." Several others turned to look. William rose from his seat. Far ahead, small golden lights shimmered through the mist. Lanterns. Dozens of them. Warm, steady, beautiful. As the train moved closer, the outlines of wooden buildings slowly emerged. A platform, a water tower, a freight shed. Everything appeared perfectly normal. William's heart beat just a little bit faster. The locomotive gave one final gentle whistle. Brakes hissed softly beneath the cars. The great train rolled to a smooth stop beside a wooden platform. William immediately looked toward the station sign. There it was, painted neatly in white letters. Blackridge. Exactly as it had appeared in the photograph. Exactly as it had been drawn on Harper's map. Exactly as every passenger had described. The station existed. Passengers began gathering their coats. No one seemed surprised. Several people casually stepped onto the platform. A porter opened the carriage door. 5-hour stop. William froze. 5 hours. Exactly listed in the old timetable. Benjamin stood. "Care to stretch your legs, Mr. Carter?" William hesitated briefly, then nodded. Together, they stepped onto the platform. The cool night air carried the comforting scent of fresh bread, apple pie, cedar wood, and burning fireplaces. Somewhere nearby, a violin played a slow, peaceful melody. Children laughed quietly along a lantern-lit street. A dog barked once before running happily toward a nearby cottage. Nothing felt abandoned. Nothing felt unnatural. It was simply a pleasant little mountain town. William immediately removed his pocket watch. 11:47 p.m. He looked toward the large station clock mounted above the ticket office. It also read 11:47 p.m. Not unusual until he noticed something. The second hand wasn't moving. He watched carefully. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. It never advanced. Curious, he glanced toward the station master standing beside the platform. A cheerful man in a navy blue uniform greeted arriving passengers with a friendly smile. "Welcome to Blackridge." William approached politely. "Good evening." The station master tipped his cap. "Good evening, sir. I'm William Carter." "A pleasure. May I ask what time your next train arrives?" The station master smiled warmly. "Oh, we're still waiting for morning." William looked back at the station clock. Its hands remained perfectly still reading 11:47 p.m. Then he noticed something even stranger. Every clock he could see, inside the station, above the hotel across the street, mounted on the church tower overlooking the square, all displayed exactly the same time, 11:47 p.m. Not one clock was running, yet no one in Blackridge seemed to find that unusual. As William quietly slipped his journal from his pocket to record the impossible sight, a gentle voice behind him spoke his name, softly, clearly, as if greeting an old friend. "Mr. Carter, we've been expecting you." William Carter closed his journal and slipped it carefully into his coat. The cool mountain breeze faded as quickly as it had arrived. Once again, Blackridge looked exactly as it had only moments before. The neat cottages stood proudly beneath glowing lanterns. Smoke curled peacefully from stone chimneys. Children laughed near the town square. The ruins he thought he had seen were gone, if they had ever existed at all. William rubbed his eyes. He had spent countless nights traveling through the mountains. Fatigue could sometimes play curious tricks upon the mind. Still, something deep inside him insisted that what he had seen had been real. Not a dream, not an illusion. A brief glimpse of another Blackridge, one hidden beneath the peaceful streets. The violin continued playing somewhere beyond the church. Its melody was slow and comforting, not cheerful, not sorrowful, simply calm. It reminded William of the songs his mother had hummed while baking bread during long Colorado winters. Without realizing it, he found himself following the music. The cobblestone street curved gently through the center of town. Flower boxes rested beneath every window. Fresh chrysanthemums decorated nearly every porch. The entire village smelled faintly of apples, cinnamon, and burning oak. It felt less like a railroad stop and more like a place where people genuinely loved living. Near the center of the square stood a small bookstore. Its front window displayed leather-bound journals, poetry collections, local histories, and carefully folded maps. A brass sign above the entrance read, "Blackridge Books and Stationery." William smiled. He had never been able to resist a good bookstore. Inside, warm lamplight illuminated tall wooden shelves filled from floor to ceiling. The scent of old paper mixed pleasantly with polished cedar. Behind the counter sat an elderly woman wearing silver spectacles. She looked up immediately. "Good evening, Mr. Carter." William laughed softly. "I suppose everyone already knows my name." She smiled kindly. "We've been waiting a long time." William had grown accustomed to hearing those words. Still, they carried an unusual weight each time. "My name is Margaret Ellis," she said. "I keep the books." William glanced around the shop. "You have quite a collection." She nodded proudly. "Every family contributes something." He wandered slowly between the shelves. Most of the books described local history. Harvest festivals, railway arrivals, school records, wedding announcements. Nothing unusual. Then one title immediately caught his attention: Visitors of Blackridge. William carefully removed the thick volume from the shelf. Its leather cover had grown soft with age. Inside were names, hundreds of them: travelers, merchants, railway workers, teachers, doctors, every visitor who had ever passed through Blackridge. Beside each name appeared only one sentence, a simple memory: shared coffee with the station master, played chess beside the fireplace, watched the first snowfall, helped repair the church roof. No dates of departure, only moments remembered. William slowly turned another page, then another. His heart skipped. There, written in neat handwriting, Edmund Harper. Beside his name were 8 words: promised he would return before another autumn arrived. William whispered, "He never came back." Margaret looked up from her desk. "Oh, he returned." William frowned. "When?" She smiled gently. "You're thinking about calendars. We don't." William closed the book slowly. Nothing about Blackridge seemed frightening. Instead, everything seemed quietly disconnected from the ordinary passage of time. No one hurried. No one counted hours. No one mentioned tomorrow. The entire town lived peacefully inside a single endless night. As William prepared to leave, Margaret reached beneath the counter. "I have something that belongs to you." She placed a small envelope in his hand. It was sealed with dark blue wax. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Mr. William Carter." No address, no postage, only his name. "When was this delivered?" Margaret answered calmly, "Many years ago." William stared at her. "That isn't possible." "It arrived long before you did." He hesitated. "Who wrote it?" "I don't know. We were simply asked to keep it safe." William carefully broke the wax seal. Inside rested a single folded sheet. His hands became strangely unsteady as he opened it. The message contained only one sentence: "When the clocks refuse to move, watch the shadows instead." No signature, no explanation, nothing else. Leaving the bookstore, William stepped back into the quiet street. He immediately began observing the shadows cast by the lanterns. The people moved naturally. Children ran across the square. The baker carried fresh loaves into his shop. A farmer pushed the wheelbarrow full of pumpkins. Everything appeared completely ordinary, except the shadows. Every person cast a shadow under the lantern light. Every building, every wagon, every tree. All except one. The station clock. Its face glowed softly above the platform, yet no shadow fell behind it. William looked again to be certain. The tower itself cast a long shadow across the platform, but the clock cast none. He quietly approached the station. The platform remained busy with travelers stretching their legs. Some chatted happily with local residents. Others admired the mountain scenery. No one seemed eager to return to the train. William removed his notebook. Station clock. He paused. Before he could finish writing, someone gently touched his shoulder. It was the station master, the same friendly man who welcomed the train. "I hope you're enjoying Blackridge." "I am." William hesitated. "I've been studying your station clock." The station master smiled warmly. "Most visitors do." "It hasn't moved." "No." "Why?" The station master looked towards the silent mountains beyond the tracks, then answered in the calmest voice imaginable. "Because it remembers the last perfect moment." William waited. The last perfect moment? The station master nodded. The night everyone was together. The night before goodbye. William was confused. Goodbye to whom? The station master simply smiled. "Perhaps you'll understand before morning." The answer raised more questions than it resolved. William thanked him and continued walking. As he reached the edge of the platform, something unusual caught his eye. A narrow footpath disappeared behind the station into a grove of tall pine trees. No lanterns illuminated it. No signs marked it. Unlike the rest of Blackridge, it seemed almost forgotten, untouched. An elderly porter noticed William looking toward the path. His expression changed ever so slightly. "You shouldn't go there." William turned. "Why not?" "The town ends there." "What lies beyond?" The old porter lowered his voice. "Morning." William looked back toward the path. Only darkness waited between the trees. For the first time since arriving, Blackridge no longer felt like a peaceful mystery. It felt like a place carefully protecting something, not from strangers, but from the sunrise itself. Just then, a distant steam whistle echoed across the valley. William instinctively turned towards the tracks. The Frontier Express remained exactly where it had always been, silent, motionless. No steam escaped its engine. No lights had changed. Yet the whistle had been unmistakable. One long, lonely call. Benjamin Foster appeared beside him carrying 2 cups of warm coffee. "Did you hear that?" William nodded. "The train?" The Benjamin slowly shook his head. "Our train doesn't sound like that." The 2 men stood silently beneath the frozen station clock, listening. Far away, beyond the pine trees, another steam whistle answered, then another, as though unseen trains were passing through the mountains on tracks that no longer existed. William Carter slowly turned toward the voice. Standing only a few steps behind him was a young woman wearing a neatly pressed navy blue dress beneath a cream-colored wool shawl. She appeared to be no older than 25. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a simple bonnet, and she held a brass lantern that cast a warm glow across the platform. She smiled politely. Not the smile of someone meeting a stranger, the smile of someone welcoming a long-awaited guest. "Good evening, Mr. Carter." William removed his hat. "I am afraid we've never met." The young woman laughed softly. "Not yet." The answer was so calm, so natural, that William found himself saying nothing for several moments. Finally, he asked, "My name is written on my luggage?" She gently shook her head. "No." "Then how do you know who I am?" She looked toward the station building. "Our station master told us to expect you." William glanced back. The station master was speaking with another group of passengers. He had never asked William's name, yet he greeted everyone with quiet certainty. The young woman noticed William's confusion. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I manage the Grand Hotel." She pointed toward the large 3-story building standing across from the station. Warm golden light spilled from every window. Flower boxes rested beneath each balcony. Smoke drifted peacefully from 2 stone chimneys. It looked inviting, comfortable, like a place travelers had visited for generations. "If you'd like somewhere warm before departure, our rooms are ready." William looked toward the station clock. Still 11:47. The hands had not moved. Benjamin Foster approached carrying his small leather suitcase. "There you are, Mr. Carter." He nodded toward Clara. "I've already reserved a room." William looked surprised. "You've been here before?" Benjamin smiled. "No." But she greeted me by name as well. Clara answered cheerfully. "We try to make everyone feel expected." The 3 of them crossed the quiet street together. Lanterns illuminated neat rows of maple trees, whose golden leaves drifted gently onto the cobblestones. Children chased one another across the village square. A blacksmith quietly closed his workshop for the evening. An elderly couple sat upon a wooden bench sharing hot tea. Nothing seemed hurried. No one looked tired. It felt as though the entire town had decided to remain forever suspended in the most peaceful hour of the night. The Grand Hotel's entrance doors opened with a soft creak. Inside, warmth surrounded them immediately. A crackling fireplace filled the lobby with comforting light. The scent of cinnamon, fresh bread, and polished cedar drifted through the air. A grandfather clock stood proudly beside the staircase. William instinctively looked at its face. 11:47. It, too, had stopped. He slowly walked closer. The pendulum hung perfectly still. No ticking, no movement. Yet no dust covered the polished wood. Someone clearly cared for it every day. Clara noticed his curiosity. "It's been that way as long as I can remember." William asked quietly, "Has no one tried repairing it?" She smiled pleasantly. "It isn't broken." Before William could ask another question, a bell rang softly behind the reception desk. An elderly gentleman appeared from a side hallway. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit and silver spectacles. "Welcome to the Grand Hotel." His voice carried the warmth of someone who genuinely enjoyed greeting guests. "I'm Henry Lawson, the proprietor." He opened a large leather guest book. "Mr. Benjamin Foster." Benjamin blinked. "Yes, room 12. Thank you." Henry turned the page. "Mr. William Carter." William hesitated. "Yes." "Room 9 has been prepared." William stared. "You already knew I was coming?" The Henry looked puzzled. "Of course. We always know." Again, no explanation followed. William signed the guest book. As he handed back the pen, something caught his attention. Several signatures on the page looked strangely familiar. He leaned closer. There, written in elegant handwriting, Edmund Harper, the railway inspector from 9 years ago. Date, October 18th, 1878. William's heartbeat quickened. He quickly turned several pages. Another familiar name appeared, a conductor mentioned in Harper's notebook. Then another, and another. Every railway employee who had ever investigated Blackridge seemed to have signed this very guest book. Yet, none of the pages after their names contained departure dates, only arrivals. William looked at Henry. "I don't see where guests check out." The hotel owner smiled pleasantly. "Oh, we'll take care of that after sunrise." William felt a slight chill. "But the train leaves before sunrise." Henry nodded pleasantly. "It always has." "Then when do guests leave?" The old proprietor paused for only a heartbeat. "When morning finally arrives." Dinner was served shortly afterward. The dining room overlooked the quiet village square. Long wooden tables filled the room. Fresh bread, roasted vegetables, apple pie, steaming bowls of beef stew. Nothing extravagant, simply honest food prepared with remarkable care. Travelers chatted happily with local families. Children laughed softly without disturbing anyone. A violinist played gentle melodies near the fireplace. William noticed something unusual. No one appeared anxious. Nobody looked toward the clocks. Nobody asked when the train would depart. Time itself seemed to have lost all importance. While finishing his meal, William unfolded Harper's notebook beneath the table. One sentence immediately caught his eye. "Do not ask why everyone smiles." William frowned. He had overlooked that line before. He slowly raised his eyes. Every person in the dining room was smiling. Not forced smiles, not exaggerated happiness, simply peaceful contentment, as though each person felt exactly where they belonged. After dinner, William stepped outside for fresh air. The streets remained softly illuminated by rows of lanterns. Somewhere nearby, the church bell chimed once. He instinctively checked his watch again. Still, 11:47. His watch had stopped. He wound it carefully. Nothing. He listened closely. No ticking. The mechanism appeared perfectly intact, yet it refused to move. William looked upward. The stars overhead seemed unusually bright, beautiful, but somehow unchanging. He searched for familiar constellations. They had not shifted since arriving. Even the heavens appeared frozen. A small newspaper stand remained open near the station. An elderly gentleman arranged freshly printed newspapers into neat stacks. William purchased one for 5 cents. The headline read, "The Blackridge Gazette." He immediately checked the date. October 18th, 1887. Exactly today's date. Nothing unusual. Then he noticed the year printed beneath. It wasn't 1887, it was 1787. William looked again. Surely his eyes were mistaken. No, every copy carried the same date, 100 years earlier. He turned to the newspaper seller. "Excuse me, what year is this?" The old man smiled kindly. "Why, 1887, of course." William looked back at the paper. It still clearly read 1787. He showed it to the vendor. "You've printed the wrong year." The old man examined the page. Everything seemed perfectly normal to him. "I don't see any mistake." William lowered the newspaper slowly. Either the ink itself was changing, or only he could see it. As he walked back toward the hotel, the quiet melody of the violin drifted through the square once more. Children were still playing. The baker was still placing warm loaves into his window. The station lanterns burned with steady golden light. Everything remained exactly as it had been since the train arrived. Nothing had changed. Not a single minute seemed to have passed. Then, a cold mountain breeze swept gently through the square. For the very first time, one of the lantern flames flickered. Only once. In that brief moment of darkness, William thought he saw something impossible. Beyond the hotel, where a row of tidy houses had stood only seconds ago, he glimpsed empty ground, broken stone foundations, collapsed chimneys swallowed by weeds. Ancient ruins. Then, the lantern flames steadied again. The peaceful homes. The sound of the church bells echoed across the valley. Deep, gentle, steady. Every bell in Blackridge rang together as though the entire town had awakened to a moment it had been quietly expecting. William Carter looked toward the station clock. Its hands no longer rested at 11:47 p.m. For the first time since the Frontier Express had arrived, they pointed to 11:48 p.m. Only 1 minute. One impossible minute. Then, the hand stopped again, perfectly still. The bells immediately fell silent. It was as though the town had taken a single breath and then forgotten to breathe again. Samuel watched the clock from the edge of the square. His young face carried neither excitement nor fear, only quiet understanding. "It doesn't happen often," he whispered. William looked at him. "What just happened?" Samuel answered softly. "Someone remembered." Before William could ask another question, the boy simply tipped his cap and walked away toward the river. Within moments, he disappeared between the lantern-lit streets. The village slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm. The baker reopened his shop. Children resumed their games. The violinist continued his gentle melody beneath the old maple tree. It was almost as though the ringing bells had never happened. Only William seemed to remember, and perhaps Benjamin Foster. The elderly traveler stood near the station platform, gazing thoughtfully at the frozen clock. When William approached, Benjamin smiled faintly. "You saw it too." "I did." Benjamin nodded. I thought I was imagining things. William shook his head. No, the clock moved, but only once. Benjamin looked toward the church tower. My grandfather used to tell strange stories. About railroads? No, about places that time refused to leave behind. The two men began walking slowly through the town square. The lanterns cast long golden reflections across the cobblestones. A light autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh pine and baked apples. William removed his notebook. He carefully wrote, 11:48 p.m. The entire town reacted to a single minute. No explanation offered. As the ink dried upon the page, he noticed something impossible. The previous entries had changed. He clearly remembered writing, "Perhaps time is only borrowing the town." Now the sentence read, "Perhaps the town is borrowing time." William stared silently. He had not written those words. The handwriting was unquestionably his own. Every letter matched perfectly. Yet, the sentence had changed. He turned back another page. More differences, small ones, words rearranged, phrases corrected, entire observations refined. It felt less like someone editing his journal, and more like the journal itself was continuing the story. Benjamin noticed William had stopped walking. Everything all right? William hesitated, then quietly closed the notebook. I'll explain later. For reasons he could not fully understand, he suddenly felt reluctant to let anyone else read it. They soon arrived at the church. It stood upon a gentle hill overlooking Blackridge. White wooden walls reflected the warm glow of dozens of lanterns. The tall bell tower reached peacefully toward the star-filled sky. William climbed the stone steps. The heavy oak doors stood open. Inside, the church was beautifully simple. Long wooden pews, stained glass windows depicting quiet mountain landscapes, a modest stone altar. Fresh flowers decorated every corner. There was no sign of neglect, no dust, no decay. Everything looked lovingly cared for. Yet one detail immediately drew William's attention. There was no clock inside the church, not a single one. An elderly minister quietly arranged hymn books near the front pew. He smiled warmly as William approached. "Welcome." "Thank you. My name is William Carter." "I know." The Reverend extended his hand. "I'm Reverend Elijah Brooks." William smiled politely. "It seems everyone in Blackridge already knows who I am." The Reverend chuckled softly. "Visitors are important." William looked toward the bell tower. "May I ask who rang the bells just now?" The Reverend seemed genuinely puzzled. "No one." "But they rang." "They always do." "Who pulls the rope?" "There isn't one." William looked upward. "The bell tower has no rope?" "It hasn't needed one for many years." The Reverend invited William to climb the narrow staircase leading toward the tower. The old wooden steps creaked gently beneath their feet. Moonlight filtered through small arched windows as they climbed higher. Finally, they reached the bell chamber. William stopped. The enormous bronze bell hung peacefully above them, beautifully polished, perfectly preserved. But no rope, no chain, nothing connected to it, nothing capable of making it ring. William walked slowly around the bell. He searched every beam, every bracket. Nothing. The bell had somehow rung on its own. "What do you think?" the Reverend asked quietly. William smiled. I have one less explanation than I had 5 minutes ago." The Reverend laughed. "A wise answer." Before leaving, William noticed a row of framed photographs hanging along the staircase wall. They showed weddings, harvest festivals, Christmas gatherings, school children, simple moments from village life. One photograph caught William's attention. It showed passengers standing beside the Frontier Express. Benjamin Foster was among them. William looked carefully. The elderly gentleman appeared exactly as he did tonight. Same coat, same hat, same smile. The photograph had clearly been taken many years earlier. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "Autumn Visitors, October 1867. William counted silently. That was 20 years ago. Impossible. Benjamin could not have looked exactly the same, not after 2 decades. He gently removed the frame from the wall and carried it downstairs. Outside the church, Benjamin waited patiently. William handed him the photograph. Benjamin's pleasant expression slowly disappeared. He stared at the image for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "That can't be." "You've never been here before?" "No, never." William pointed toward the picture. "Then who is this?" Benjamin looked again. The man standing beside the train was unmistakably him. Even the tiny scar above his left eyebrow appeared clearly in the photograph. Benjamin slowly lowered the frame. "My grandfather once told me that everyone has another life waiting somewhere." He forced a gentle smile. "I always assumed she meant heaven." William carefully returned the photograph to its place. Neither man spoke as they walked back toward the square. The streets remained as peaceful as ever, yet William could no longer shake the feeling that Blackridge remembered people long before they ever arrived. The village seemed to possess memories that belonged to tomorrow instead of yesterday. As they approached the station once more, William glanced toward the Frontier Express. For the first time, he noticed movement inside one of the passenger cars. A man stood beside a window, watching the town. William frowned. The figure looked strangely familiar, almost identical to himself. Same height, same coat, same hat. The stranger slowly raised one hand. William instinctively lifted his own. The stranger smiled gently. Then, as a cloud drifted over the moon, the carriage window became dark. When the moonlight returned only seconds later, the seat was empty. No one stood inside. William remained perfectly still. Benjamin quietly followed his gaze. "What did you see?" William answered without taking his eyes from the silent train. "I am no longer certain." He paused. His voice became almost a whisper. "I think Blackridge remembers the future as well." William Carter remained standing beside the platform long after the mysterious figure had vanished from the train window. The Frontier Express rested silently beneath the soft glow of lanterns. Not a single passenger seemed concerned. Several travelers wandered through the square carrying paper bags filled with fresh bread and apples. Others chatted with local families as though they had known them for years. Everything looked peaceful, perfectly ordinary. Yet William could not forget the face he had just seen. It had been his own, not someone who merely resembled him. The same eyes, the same weathered brown coat, even the small silver pocket watch chain hanging from his vest. Benjamin Foster gently placed a hand on William's shoulder. "You've become very quiet." William smiled faintly. "I think this town has begun asking questions instead of answering them." Benjamin chuckled. "Perhaps that's what old places do." The station platform remained warm beneath rows of glowing lanterns. William slowly walked toward the passenger carriage where he had seen the mysterious stranger. He climbed the iron steps. Inside, everything appeared exactly as he had left it. Blankets rested neatly across empty seats. Oil lamps burned steadily overhead. The soft scent of polished wood filled the quiet carriage. No one occupied the window seat. He touched the wooden armrest. Still warm. as though someone had been sitting there only moments before. William looked beneath the seat. Nothing. He checked the luggage rack above. Only his own leather satchel remained. No sign that anyone else had been there. He quietly sat beside the window. Outside, Blackridge looked almost dreamlike beneath the autumn night. The church bell tower rose peacefully above the rooftops. The hotel windows glowed with golden light. Children still played beside the fountain. Not one person seemed tired. Not one person yawned. No one prepared for bed. It was as though the town existed in a perfect evening that never needed to end. William opened his journal once again. Before writing, he carefully reread his earlier notes. This time, nothing had changed. Relieved, he dipped his pen into the small ink bottle he always carried. Observed the man identical to myself inside the carriage. Disappeared moments later. He paused, then added, "No physical evidence remains." As the ink slowly dried, another sentence quietly appeared beneath his own. The handwriting matched his perfectly. "You will understand after the second whistle." William's breathing slowed. He had not written those words. He watched carefully. No more letters appeared. Only that single sentence. Waiting. He closed the journal immediately. Whatever force seemed to be guiding the book, it had become more direct, almost personal. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The compartment door slid open. Clara Whitmore stood smiling in the hallway. "I thought you might enjoy some tea." She carried a small silver tray holding 2 delicate porcelain cups. William accepted gratefully. "Thank you." She sat across from him. For several moments, neither spoke. The train creaked gently in the cool night air. Finally, William asked, "Has Blackridge always been here?" Clara looked thoughtfully toward the station. "As long as anyone remembers." "And before that?" She smiled. "No one remembers before memory." It was another answer that sounded meaningful, yet explained almost nothing. William tried a different question. "Have you ever visited Denver?" She looked genuinely curious. "I've heard the name, but no." "You've never left?" Clara slowly shook her head. "I've never needed to." William looked out the window. "What lies beyond the mountains?" "The next station." "And beyond that?" She thought quietly. "I don't know." "You've never wondered?" She smiled gently. "Do fish wonder about deserts?" William laughed softly. "I suppose not." Their conversation drifted comfortably from books to weather, from music to autumn harvests. Clara spoke with warmth and intelligence, yet William gradually noticed something unusual. She never referred to the future. Not once. She spoke about today, yesterday, the changing seasons, but never tomorrow. When he finally asked, "What are your plans next year?" she simply looked confused. Why would next year be different? The question lingered in William's mind long after Clara returned to the hotel. Stepping off the train once more, William wandered toward the edge of the village. Near the river stood a small wooden bridge. Moonlight shimmered across the gently flowing water. The stream moved quietly over smooth stones. At least, it appeared to. William knelt beside the bank. Something seemed wrong. He stared carefully. The reflections of the stars remained perfectly still upon the water. The current flowed beneath them, yet the reflected stars did not ripple. They remained frozen, as though the sky and the river belonged to different moments. William reached down and dipped his fingertips into the cold stream. The instant the water touched his hand, the reflections shattered into countless silver fragments. For one brief heartbeat, he no longer saw stars. Instead, he saw another sky, bright blue, filled with morning sunlight. He jerked his hand back. The vision immediately vanished. The peaceful night returned. "You saw it," the quiet voice came from behind him. William turned. It was Margaret Ellis, the elderly bookseller. She carried a small wicker basket filled with newly bound journals. "You've seen the river before?" Margaret nodded. "Everyone who stays long enough does." What did I see? She walked beside him onto the bridge. The river remembers every sunrise. William looked back toward the water. But this town has no sunrise. Exactly. She smiled sadly. The river remembers what we cannot. William leaned against the bridge railing. For the first time, he searched for the right words, as though Blackridge is visiting me. The old woman nodded slowly. Now you're beginning to understand. A cool breeze drifted across the valley. Leaves spiraled gently through the air before settling upon the bridge. Far away, a steam whistle echoed once again. Long, low, beautiful. William immediately remembered the mysterious sentence in his journal. You will understand after the second whistle. He counted silently. This was the second. The whistle faded. Silence followed. Then, every lantern in Blackridge flickered at exactly the same moment. Just once. Only once. The peaceful village disappeared. For less than a heartbeat, William no longer saw cottages, no church, no hotel, only abandoned foundations, broken chimneys, collapsed walls swallowed by vines, rusted railway tracks disappearing beneath wild grass, and the lonely station sign lying face down in the weeds. Then the lantern steadied again. The beautiful town instantly returned. No one reacted. No one even noticed. Only William stood frozen upon the bridge. Margaret quietly watched his face. You saw the real Blackridge. William whispered. No, I saw what Blackridge became. The old woman gently corrected him. Not yet. She looked toward the silent station. Her voice became almost a whisper. That is what Blackridge is trying very hard not to remember. William Carter stood beneath the station clock, unable to take his eyes off its face. For the second time since arriving in Blackridge, the minute hand had moved. Now it rested quietly at 11:49 p.m. No ticking followed. No second hand swept around the dial. The clock simply became still again. Yet, everyone in the village seemed to sense what had happened. The baker quietly extinguished one lantern outside his shop. The violinist carefully placed his instrument inside its worn leather case. Children who had been laughing only moments before gently took their parents' hands. The peaceful town had changed, not dramatically, only subtly, like the final pages of a favorite book slowly approaching. William looked toward the Frontier Express. A thin ribbon of steam drifted lazily from beneath its great engine. That had not happened before. The locomotive had stood completely silent ever since arriving. Now, it seemed awake, almost as though it had been listening. Benjamin Foster joined William on the platform. I believe the train is preparing. William nodded slowly. So do I. But preparing for what? I still don't know. The station master approached carrying a brass pocket watch. Unlike every other clock William had seen in Blackridge, this one was still running. Tick, tick, tick. Its gentle rhythm sounded strangely loud beneath the quiet night. William stared. How is that possible? The station master smiled warmly. It doesn't belong to the town. It belongs to the railway. He carefully closed the watch and slipped it back into his vest. When the railway remembers us, time remembers us too. The words settled quietly into William's thoughts. Everything in Blackridge seemed connected to memory. The clocks, the river, the photographs, even the people. Perhaps the railway itself possessed memories. A low whistle echoed from the locomotive, not the loud call announcing departure, This whistle sounded almost curious. No one in Blackridge moved. The faint ribbon of golden light rested quietly along the eastern horizon. It was not yet sunrise. The stars still shone above the valley. The lanterns still burned warmly. Yet the entire town had become perfectly silent. William Carter looked around the square. Only moments ago, children had been laughing. The baker had been arranging fresh loaves in his window. The violinist had been playing beneath the old maple tree. Now, everyone simply watched the distant light, not with fear, with recognition, as though greeting someone they had not seen in a very long time. The station master slowly removed his cap. The townspeople did the same, one by one. Parents, children, shopkeepers, travelers. Even the hotel owner quietly bowed his head. William stood among them without understanding why. The silence itself seemed worthy of respect. It lasted nearly a full minute. Then, the pale light beyond the mountains slowly faded. The valley returned to its familiar moonlit calm. The townspeople quietly resumed their lives. Children continued playing. The baker smiled at his customers. The violin began once more. If William had blinked, he might have believed nothing had happened. Reverend Elijah Brooks gently touched William's shoulder. "Would you care to walk with me?" William nodded. Together, they climbed the hill behind the church. A narrow path wound through rows of ancient pine trees until it reached a small stone overlook above the valley. From there, Blackridge looked almost magical. Golden lanterns shimmered like stars scattered across the mountainside. The Frontier Express rested peacefully beside the station. Beyond it stretched endless forests disappearing beneath silver moonlight. "It really is beautiful," William whispered. The Reverend smiled. "It always was." They sat quietly upon an old wooden bench. After several moments, William finally asked, "What happened here?" The Reverend looked toward the village below. "For many years, I prayed someone would ask that question." He folded his hands together. "My grandfather was the minister before me, and his grandfather before him. Our family has watched over Blackridge for generations." William listened carefully. The town once stood on every railway map. It welcomed travelers from every direction. Families settled here. Children grew up here. The station was always busy. There was laughter every evening. And every autumn, the valley glowed exactly as it does tonight. William smiled. "It sounds peaceful." It was. The Reverend's voice grew quieter. Then the winter of 1879 arrived. William remained silent. The snow came early, much earlier than anyone expected. Storm after storm buried the mountain passes. Railway lines disappeared beneath walls of ice. For weeks, no trains arrived. No supplies reached the valley. The Reverend looked toward the silent station. Still, the people waited. They believed spring would come. They believed the railway would return. William noticed the Reverend's hands trembling ever so slightly. It never did. The final snowfall lasted 12 days. When the storm finally ended, the mountain above Blackridge had changed. William understood immediately. A landslide. The Reverend slowly nodded. The entire eastern pass collapsed. Hundreds of feet of rock buried the railway. The tracks disappeared. The telegraph lines snapped. The road through the valley vanished beneath stone. William looked toward the peaceful station. So the town became isolated. For a time, yes. The Reverend closed his eyes. The railway company searched. Surveyors climbed the mountains. Rescue parties followed every remaining trail, but winter refused to release the valley. When spring finally arrived, they found only ruins. William looked down at Blackridge. It doesn't look like ruins. No, it doesn't. The Reverend reached into his coat pocket. He removed an old photograph. Its edges had become worn with age. William carefully accepted it. The picture showed Blackridge exactly as he had seen it tonight. Only half the buildings had collapsed. The station roof had fallen inward. The church bell tower leaned dangerously to one side. Snow covered everything. No people stood in the streets. Only silence. Across the bottom, someone had written, Blackridge, April 1980. William compared the photograph with the living town below. The difference was heartbreaking. The official reports declared Blackridge abandoned. The railway company built a new line farther south. Maps were redrawn. The station was erased. Within a few years, only old engineers remembered it had ever existed. William looked back toward the valley. But the people? The Reverend smiled sadly. People are remembered differently. William quietly returned the photograph. You mean, the Reverend finished the sentence for him. Every soul who ever loved this town refused to let it disappear. A cool breeze drifted across the overlook. Below them, the lanterns flickered softly. William suddenly remembered the vision he had seen beside the river. The ruined streets, the broken chimneys, the abandoned station. Those ruins, they're real. The Reverend nodded. They still exist, hidden beneath memory. William tried to understand. So Blackridge isn't haunting the mountains. No, the mountains are remembering Blackridge. For a long time, neither man spoke. The answer somehow felt both impossible and completely true. Eventually, they returned toward the village. As they reached the square, William noticed Margaret Ellis standing outside her bookstore. She held another old journal in her hands. When she saw him, she smiled warmly. "I've been looking for you." She handed him the leather volume. It belonged to the station master. William carefully opened the first page. Written in elegant handwriting was the year 1879, the final year before Blackridge disappeared from every official map. Most of the journal contained ordinary entries: train arrivals, weather reports, harvest celebrations, school concerts, simple village life. Then, near the end, the handwriting suddenly changed. It became hurried, uneven. The final completed entry read, "The mountain has fallen. The eastern line is gone. We can no longer hear the morning train. The children keep asking when the next passengers will arrive. No one knows what to tell them." William slowly turned the final page. Only one sentence had been written, neatly, carefully, almost peacefully. "If the trains cannot find us, perhaps memory will." William gently closed the journal. A lump formed in his throat. For the first time since arriving, the mystery of Blackridge no longer felt impossible. It felt deeply human. A town that had been loved so completely that even after history erased it, memory refused to let it die. At that exact moment, the station clock trembled again. Its minute hand moved forward once more, from 11:48 p.m. to 11:49 p.m. Across the valley, a distant steam whistle answered, not from the Frontier Express, but from somewhere beyond the forgotten mountains. It sounded closer than ever before, as though another train was finally finding its way home. The locomotive's gentle whistle drifted across Blackridge like a familiar greeting. No one hurried. No one panicked. Instead, the people of the town quietly smiled at one another, as though they had heard that same whistle countless times before. William Carter stood beside the station platform, watching a thin ribbon of steam rise slowly from the Frontier Express. For the first time since arriving, the engine seemed alive. The great driving wheels creaked softly. Metal settled against metal. The polished brass headlamp glowed a little brighter. Yet no conductor called for boarding. No passengers gathered their luggage. Everything remained strangely calm. The station master stepped onto the platform carrying an old leather satchel. He handed it to William. "I believe this belongs to you." William looked puzzled. "It can't. I've never seen it before." The station master smiled kindly. "You will." William carefully opened the satchel. Inside were several ordinary belongings: a neatly folded wool scarf, a silver fountain pen, a railway timetable, a worn leather journal. Everything looked strangely familiar. When he picked up the journal, his heart skipped. Embossed into the cover were two initials: W.C. William Carter. He slowly opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably his own. The opening sentence read, "If you are reading this, you have finally arrived." William's fingers trembled. He had never written those words, yet every letter belonged to him. He turned another page. The journal described Blackridge, the station, the church, the hotel, even conversations he had only recently experienced. But the entries continued beyond the present. Several pages remained filled with events that had not yet happened. William stopped reading. He quietly closed the journal. Some mysteries, he decided, deserved patience. Benjamin Foster noticed William's expression. "What is it?" William smiled gently. "I think someone has been writing my memories before I lived them." Benjamin laughed softly. "In this town, I'm beginning to believe anything." The church bell rang once. A single peaceful note floated across the valley. The townspeople slowly began gathering in the square. Not because anyone had called them. They simply seemed to know. Children stood beside their parents. Shopkeepers closed their doors. The violinist removed his hat. Clara Whitmore walked from the Grand Hotel carrying a small wooden box wrapped in blue ribbon. She approached William. "This is for you." He accepted it carefully. "What is it?" "A thank you. For visiting." William untied the ribbon. Inside rested a simple brass ticket. Unlike every other ticket he had ever seen, no destination was printed upon it. Only 4 quiet words. "Return whenever you remember." William looked up. "I'll keep it." Clara smiled cleverly. "We knew you would." A cool breeze drifted through the village. Golden leaves spiraled gently across the platform. William suddenly noticed something remarkable. Several lanterns had begun to fading, not extinguishing, simply becoming less bright, almost transparent. He looked toward the nearest cottage. For just an instant, the wooden walls shimmered. Beneath them, he saw broken stone foundations. Then the cottage returned. Margaret Ellis quietly joined him. "You've started seeing both worlds." William nodded. "The town and the ruins." Margaret smiled sadly. "The closer morning comes, the harder Blackridge must remember itself." William looked toward the eastern horizon. The faint ribbon of pale gold had returned. This time, it lingered longer. The stars nearest the mountains had begun to fade. Samuel walked quietly onto the platform carrying his small carved whistle. He handed it to William. "I finished it." William accepted the tiny wooden whistle with great care. "I can't take this." Samuel grinned softly. "You already did." William laughed softly. "I don't understand." "You will." The boy looked toward the train. "When you hear the third whistle." William slipped a tiny wooden whistle into his pocket. It felt surprisingly warm, as though someone else had carried it for many years. The station master climbed aboard the Frontier Express. One by one, the crew quietly returned to their places. Still, no one announced departure. The engine simply waited. William removed his pocket watch. For the first time since entering Blackridge, it ticked. Once, twice, 3 times. The hands slowly began moving. 11:49, 11:50. William looked quickly toward the great station clock. It still read 11:49 p.m. Only his own watch had awakened. Benjamin frowned. "Your watch is running." William nodded. "It is." Benjamin reached into his own pocket. His watch remained frozen. Curious. William looked thoughtfully toward the train. "No, I think the railway is beginning to let me go." A familiar voice interrupted them. It was Reverend Elijah Brooks. He carried the old station master's journal under one arm. "The valley has remembered enough." William looked at him. "What happens now?" The Reverend answered quietly. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you leave or stay." The question settled heavily on William's heart. He looked around Blackridge, the peaceful streets, the glowing hotel, the church, the bookstore, the smiling faces that had welcomed him as though he were an old friend. Leaving suddenly felt more difficult than he had imagined, not because he feared the unknown, because he had begun to love the town. The Reverend seemed to understand. "Every visitor reaches this moment." "They do?" He nodded. "Blackridge never asks anyone to remain, but it always hopes." William smiled gently. "Hope can be very persuasive." Far above the valley, clouds slowly parted. Moonlight flooded the station. For one breathtaking moment, William saw both Blackridges at once. The living town, filled with warm lanterns and gentle laughter, and beneath it, the forgotten ruins, broken walls, collapsed roofs, rusted rails disappearing beneath wildflowers. Neither image replaced the other. They existed together, memory and history, side by side. William whispered, "So this is the truth." The Reverend nodded. "Yes, the town never truly vanished. It simply survived in a different way." The silence was broken by a deep, echoing steam whistle. Long, warm, beautiful. Not from somewhere beyond the mountains, not from an invisible railway, from the Frontier Express itself. Samuel smiled. The third whistle. William reached into his pocket. The little wooden whistle the boy had given him had transformed. It was no longer smooth new wood. It had become old, its edges polished by countless years of careful use. Tiny initials had appeared near its mouthpiece. WC. William turned it over slowly. For a long moment, he simply stared. Then he looked toward the waiting train. The conductor stood at the open carriage door, smiling, as though he had been waiting for him all along. He tipped his cap and quietly spoke just 7 words. "Mr. Carter, it's almost time to go home." The conductor remained standing beside the open carriage door. His hand rested lightly against the polished brass rail. He did not rush William. He simply waited, as though he already knew the choice William would make. The station was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Every face in Blackridge turned toward the platform. Clara Whitmore, Margaret Ellis, Samuel, Reverend Elijah Brooks, Benjamin Foster, the station master. Even the children stood quietly beneath the lanterns, not with sadness, with hope. William Carter looked down at the wooden whistle resting in his hand. The tiny initials, WC, caught the moonlight. It suddenly felt older than it should, as though it had spent years inside another man's pocket. Or perhaps, inside his own. He carefully flipped it into his coat, beside the mysterious railway ticket. The ticket that simply read, "Return whenever you remember." Benjamin stepped beside him. "I suppose this is goodbye." William smiled gently. "I don't think so." Benjamin looked surprised. "You don't?" William shook his head. "No. I think places like Blackridge never really say goodbye. They simply wait." Benjamin laughed quietly. "I hope you're right." The conductor approached carrying one final object, a beautifully carved wooden box. Inside rested a small brass nameplate. William lifted it carefully. Engraved across its polished surface were simple words, "Railway Inspector William Carter." Below the name, one final line, "Thank you for remembering." William slowly looked up. "I've never worked here." The station master smiled. "No, but tonight, you did." A cool wind drifted across the valley. The lanterns flickered together. Once, twice, 3 times. The entire town shimmered. The warm cottages became transparent. The church bell tower faded. The grand hotel slowly dissolved into moonlight. For the first time, no illusion returned. William now saw only the real Blackridge. Stone foundations covered in moss, collapsed rooftops, broken windows, rusted railway tracks swallowed by grass. The station platform cracked by nearly a century of harsh winters. Silence filled the valley. No music, no laughter, no smell of bread. Only the whisper of mountain wind. Yet, the people remained. Clara still stood smiling. Samuel still held his cap. Margaret still carried her basket of books. None of them disappeared, only the town around them. Reverend Brooks quietly stepped forward. "This is how history remembers us." William looked around the ruined station. "And memory?" The Reverend smiled. "You've already seen that." William suddenly understood. Blackridge had never been pretending to exist. It existed exactly where every forgotten place continues to exist, inside memory. As long as someone remembered, the town lived. The conductor called softly, "All aboard." Passengers quietly climbed onto the Frontier Express. None seemed frightened. None looked confused. Almost as though every traveler had already accepted what William had just discovered. Benjamin climbed on board and found his seat. Before entering, he looked back. "Are you coming?" William turned once more toward Blackridge. Clara smiled. Samuel waved. Margaret closed her eyes peacefully. The station master tipped his cap. No one asked him to stay. No one asked him to leave. The decision had always been his. William stepped onto the train. The conductor gently closed the carriage door. With a deep metallic sigh, the great motor awakened. Steam rolled across the ruined platform. The massive wheels began slowly turning. For the first time, the Frontier Express moved. It rolled silently through the abandoned station, past the broken signal tower, past the collapsed freight house, past fields where wildflowers now covered forgotten rails. William looked through the carriage window. The people of Blackridge remained standing together. Every one of them smiled. Then one by one, they began fading into the morning mist. Not disappearing, simply becoming part of it itself, as though they had always belonged to the valley itself. Samuel raised one hand. Clara gently bowed. Reverend Brooks placed his hand over his heart. Finally, only the empty station remained. Then even that vanished behind the trees. The train continued east. For the first time in many hours, the stars slowly disappeared. The sky turned deep blue. Birds began singing somewhere beyond the mountains. William closed his eyes. Warm sunlight touched his face. Real sunlight. Morning had finally arrived. A loud voice echoed through the carriage. "Denver Station." William opened his eyes. Passengers gathered their luggage. The train bustled with ordinary life. Everything looked completely normal. Had it all been a dream? He reached into his coat. The brass railway ticket remained. So did the tiny wooden whistle. Both were real. Very real. Several days later, William visited the headquarters of the Colorado Railway Company. Superintendent Avery waited patiently inside his office. The older man immediately noticed the expression on William's face. "You found it." William quietly nodded. "Yes." "And?" He placed Harper's 2 journals upon the desk. Beside them, he carefully laid the brass railway ticket, the wooden whistle, and the engraved nameplate. Avery looked at them silently, then whispered slowly, "So, it still remembers?" William smiled. "It always will." Months passed. William completed his official report. It contained no mention of ghosts, no impossible clocks, no mysterious visions, only one sentence. The former Blackridge station no longer exists upon any active railway line. The report was accepted without question, filed away, eventually forgotten. Exactly as history often forgets. But William never forgot. Every autumn, on the same October evening, he returned to the mountains. He walked to the place where Blackridge had once stood. There were only ruins, broken stone, rusted rails, wildflowers, nothing more. Yet, every year, as midnight approached, a single steam whistle echoed softly through the valley. Far away, warm, familiar. William always smiled. Then he quietly placed one fresh lantern beside the old station foundation. He never lit it. He never needed to. Because somewhere, beyond maps, beyond clocks, beyond history itself, the lights of Blackridge were already shining, waiting for the next traveler who still believed that forgotten places deserved to be remembered. And if on a quiet autumn night you ever board an old train crossing the Colorado mountains, and the conductor unexpectedly announces a stop that doesn't appear on your ticket, listen carefully before stepping onto the platform. If you hear children laughing, if you smell fresh bread drifting through the cool night air, if every clock around you reads 11:47 p.m., don't be afraid. Someone in Blackridge has remembered you, and perhaps they've been waiting all along. The end.